볼로디미르 젤렌스키 우크라이나 대통령이 유엔 안보리 회의에서 러시아를 강력하게 규탄하며 민간인 학살에 대한 전적인 책임을 요구했습니다. 젤렌스키 대통령은 러시아의 책임을 요구하는 한편 안보리에도 러시아의 안보리 퇴출을 위해 즉각 행동할 것을 촉구했습니다. 연설이 끝나자 회의에 참석한 대사들은 박수를 쳤습니다. 이처럼 극단으로 치달은 상황에 단초를 제공한 것이 도대체 누구냐는 책임론도 불거지는 중인데요. 사실 우크라이나가 핵무기를 포기하지 않았거나 나토나 EU에만 가입했어도 이 정도 상황이 되지는 않았을 것이라는 의견도 지배적입니다. 이 같은 상황 속에 66년 전 미국 토론 방송에서 미래의 상황을 정확히 예측한 한국인 고등학생에게 시선이 집중되고 있습니다. 6.25 전쟁이 끝난 후였던 1956년 유엔은 전 세계 각지에서 미국의 교환학생으로 온 17세 학생 4명을 선발해 토론을 진행했습니다. 토론 주제는 공산당 중국을 유엔에서 받아들여야 하는가였습니다. 중국이 유엔에 정식으로 가입한 건 1971년으로 토론이 열렸던 1956년에는 유엔 회원국이 아니었죠. 토론 주제를 두고 학생들의 찬반이 엇갈렸는데 노르웨이와 호주 학생은 유엔이 중국을 받아들여야 한다고 주장했고 한국과 필리핀 학생은 반대했습니다. 게다가 한국 학생은 가능하다면 러시아조차 유엔에서 제외시켜야 한다고 말합니다. 지난해 시진핑 중국 국가주석은 공산당 100주년 연설에서 외부 세력이 중국을 압박한다면 머리가 깨져 피를 흘릴 것이라고 으름장을 놓았습니다. 중국은 다른 나라를 괴롭히지 않을 것이라고도 했지만 호주가 미국 편에 섰다는 이유로 경제 보복을 당했고 한국 또한 사드 배치로 많은 기업들이 어려운 시간을 보내야만 했습니다. 최근까지 중국이 세계에 보여준 행보와 함께 러시아의 행보까지 만천하에 드러나면서 해당 토론이 다시 화제가 됐습니다.
Should all countries be allowed to join the United Nations?
I come from Korea. If the question means admitting Red China, I say no.
I'm from Norway and I happen to disagree with Nak-chung from Korea. I think that if the Red China is not admitted in the United Nations, it will increase the threat of war.
I come from the Philippines, and I agree with the delegate from Korea. We can't let communist China in now.
Australia is my country, and I agree with Pear. The United Nations can only promote world peace when the whole world belongs to it.
Here to talk about the world we want are 4 17-year-old students who have been in the United States just 2 weeks. First is Nak-chung Paek from Korea, then Pear alias Pete Rooston from Norway, Roman Cruz Jr. from the Philippine Islands, and champion debater Leslie Scholes from Australia.
The present Red Communist government was supported by Russia. I think that if you regard on the conditions in Russia in 1917 and the present conditions today, you'll see large improvements, and I think the same would happen to China. In my opinion, people as the Chinese, they don't need freedom yet, they need food and clothes. That is the main thing when you are starving, not freedom.
Roman, also, if you think there are other Asian countries where the people are starving that are not under communist governments, so it really doesn't follow that we should exclude Red China just because the communist government has not as yet fulfilled their promise.
I think the important thing is that communist China does not deserve a seat in the United Nations because they are not a peace-loving country as prescribed in the Charter of the United Nations. And I believe that even if we admit Red China into the United Nations, it will not become a peaceful country.
May I ask you, if you say that communist China is not a peaceful country, would you say that Russia is a peaceful country?
Well, Russia was the ally of the United States and Great Britain and such countries when the United Nations was formed. And I think we would have a more effective organization if we have only the peace-loving and cooperative countries in the United Nations.
Listen,
Are you saying that Russia then should be excluded from the United Nations?
If possible.
But then what's the use of the United Nations if it isn't to discuss? And to discuss, you've got to have two countries with different points of view. If you put out Russia, then who have you got to argue with? No one. And the United Nations is ineffective.
It would be a farce. The United Nations would be a farce if you got Russia out.
Well, we can tell the people with action. Well, the United Nations without the filibustering of the communist nations can be more effective, and we can achieve more. And then the United Nations, which can achieve more, will mean more to the people who are starving, as you said.
Are you advocating the use of force by us to meet force?
Well, not necessarily, but if our freedom and our life is threatened by the use of force by other countries, we have to defend ourselves with force. But it is still another that to defend ourselves with force when our freedom and our life is threatened. I'm always reminded of the blood and the sweat and the tears with which we gained freedom. Well, in Korea, for instance, we fought with blood against Japanese imperialism. Then after that, we fought, suffering 1 million of casualty against communist aggression. And can you say that you can just give away this freedom simply because force is the method that communists use?
May I ask you, do you think you could make peace by hating due to communist attacks and stuff like that? But still, I think the sooner you forget it, the better it would be, because you're not supposed to think in 1 or 2 years. We are supposed to think in 20 or 50 years.
Of course, it's true. We hate communism, but we don't hate the Russian, Chinese, or North Korean people. What we hate is the communism, the ideology.
If we had have allowed Red China into the United Nations, if they'd been in it, there may not have been a Korean War. We could have, then they would have had the foundation for discussion. We would have allowed them, we would have met them on equal grounds. But at the present we're not.
Communist China, as we see from the recent history, has no intentions of abiding by terms and treaties.
Yeah,
you can see from the Korean War.
Discussion can only be successful when the parties of the discussion have a same aim. The communist aim is not to be an honored and a respected member of a peaceful community. Their aim is to conquer the world and dominate the world and rule it by their own means.
No, because, I mean, the Norwegians are an educated people. We have a high standard of education. When Russia get it, she will also think in the same way. I mean, people who have a high standard of living and a high standard of education, they will feel that they need freedom. But that isn't the most important thing of people who are poor.
No, it is not the highly educated people alone who feel that freedom is important. The freedom is a precious thing to everybody, educated or not educated. Well, as a Korean, I once lost both freedom and food, but after that experience, we never sell freedom I hate war more than anyone else, I think. But the best way to prevent war is not fearing it too much. It is to make ourselves so strong that the communists may realize that it is a foolish dream to try to conquer us.
영상 속 한국인 학생은 백낙청 서울대 교수입니다. 당시 17세였던 그는 영어를 비롯해 5개 국어를 할 수 있었던 영재였으며 고등학교 재학 중 뉴욕 헤럴드 트리뷴이 주최하는 세계 고교생 토론 대회에 한국 대표로 선발됐습니다. 브라운 대학교 졸업 당시 전체 졸업생을 대표하여 졸업 연설을 했고 하버드 대학교에서 석사를 마친 후 일시 귀국해 군복무를 마치고 다시 유학길에 올랐습니다. 유학이 합법적 군 기피 수단이었던 시절에 입대를 위해 귀국한 그의 사연은 큰 화제가 되기도 했습니다. 확고한 주권을 가지고 자신의 주장을 적절하고 강력하게 펼쳐나가는 한국 학생의 모습에 모두가 놀랐는데요. 66년이 지난 지금 이 영상을 본 해외 네티즌들은 한국 학생이 말한 게 모두 옳았고 한국인들은 그들의 나라를 강한 나라로 만들어서 지금 감히 아무도 한국을 괴롭히지 못하고 있다는 평을 하기도 했습니다. 여러분의 소중한 의견을 남겨주세요. 바쁘시더라도 구독과 좋아요 부탁드립니다. 지금까지 단골이시였습니다. 시청해주셔서 감사합니다.